So if the state is able to come in and pay for one of those storage systems, it can decrease the cost of the overall improvement. I will say, I think the end goal and the final solution is going to be the soil health work that we can do on the farms, and also that drainage water management to have access to that water throughout the year. I mean, all of that kind of works together to keeping that water in the soil. But in the interim, since we're not there yet, these storage practices are really gonna help.
Welcome back to the Water Table. Today we're joined by Rita Weaver, the Chief Engineer for the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources.
Correct.
That's correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Rita.
Yeah, happy to be here.
First question. So again, I always struggle going through Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, and there's also the Soil and Water Conservation Districts and things like that. What's the right way? What's soil and water versus water and soil? Why is Bowser different? Just for the acronym Bowser?
That's a good question. I don't know why they're different. I mean, we're obviously the state agency, and then the soil and water conservation districts are all local agencies. So, but I don't know if they specifically set that up for a certain reason. So,
no, that's just something that I always stumble over whenever I talk through some of that stuff. But anyway, sorry. Thanks for coming on and being able to on the Water Table, and today kind of get into some of the stuff that is going on at Bowser, some of the programs that you're working with, and some of the presentations, some of the education and outreach, things that are going on, and kind of educate some of our audience on some opportunities with soil and water conservation within the state. So first off, you want to introduce, you give a little background on yourself and kind of your role as Chief Engineer with Bowser.
Sure. I've been an engineer for over 20 years now, and I started out in consulting, but then felt the call to state service, probably 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I worked for the DNR for about 5 years, and then found the position with Bowser and took that, and I love it. I grew up on a farm, so being kind of closer to the needs of our producers and farmers just is very close to me, very dear to me. And my role at Bowser, I am the chief engineer, and I'm also the engineering section manager. So I manage staff that do wetland restorations. So on our perpetual easements that the state takes on, we design the wetlands for those. And then we have staff that oversee the construction of those sites too. We also have a training component. So we teach our partners the how to design and construct different engineering practices throughout the state too. We have staff that do that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And what is kind of, I guess, maybe take a little step back in Bowser, and kind of what is Bowser's role with kind of within the state and some of the waters and some of the programs that is going on?
Well, a big part of what we do is we receive money from the legislature, specific appropriations for conservation work. So we're kind of a pass-through agency. The majority of the funding that Bowser gets goes out to our local partners so that they can do good work, that they can do conservation projects, that they can do water quality projects, things like that. So that's probably the majority of what Bowser does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of the whole approach on clean waters and environmental impacts on all this stuff too. And specifically, is most of that work surrounding drainage? Or do you get involved with some other maybe more agronomic practices, or kind of where do some of those, what are some of the projects that those dollars go to?
I would summarize it most as on private property. We do a lot of projects on private property. So again, it's our producers that we're doing projects on. Whether or not it's drainage, some on drainage, some not. So we're definitely looking for ways to help drainage systems, improve water quality, implement little conservation practices that aren't going to affect their capacity, but will still, just improve how they function a little bit better. So, but yeah, we do both drainage and non-drainage areas within the state. So
sure. And maybe digging into some of those projects. So we've had guests on a handful of times, some engineers that are, designing some drainage infrastructure, improvements or repairs and things like that. I know there's there's programs, and again, some of those dollars are available for, storage ponds and different, water treatment conservation practices on those landscapes. But maybe kind of walk through what does kind of a typical, say, county main replacement or improvement project look like, or what are some of the opportunities that for the programs that Bowser has?
Sure. So typically how it would work is there would be an engineer already working with the drainage authority or the folks that live on the drainage system, looking for ways to do the improvement. So determining, how much they need to increase capacity, whether it's just a repair issue, they would work through that part of it. And then in addition to that work that's getting done, Bowser has grants that allows the drainage authority to go above and beyond just your typical improvement, just your typical repair. So the engineer will typically look for places that maybe storage makes sense. So if we put in storage here, we can reduce the peak flows, allowing for more capacity in the drainage system. So they'll take a look and try to find those locations for those conservation practices. And then Bowser's grants can then be used to pay for those storage systems. So that way the producers aren't taking that on because the drainage authority is the one that kind of helps the drainage system function and oversees it. But the folks that live on the drainage system are the ones that have to pay for everything. So if the state is able to come in and pay for one of those storage systems, it can decrease the cost of the overall improvement. It can lead to less repairs further down the road. So that's where the state can come in, put in a storage pond, a wetland restoration, a series of wasp cobs. Those are the types of practices that we've been paying for with our water quality and storage grant that we have been somewhat pushing to put on drainage systems.
Sure.
Just because we know that's where work is already getting done, and it's something again that can help further downstream with clean water and better capacity on the systems.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, something that we're obviously really passionate about here at Prinsco is, hey, we understand that we need to have, I guess, better infrastructure out there. Some of the drainage mains and some of that infrastructure is crumbling. It is essentially a liability that's out there on the landscape and needs to be replaced and in cases improved for, the needs of production agriculture now. That obviously has some of those, can have some drawbacks, with downstream flows or water quality and things like that. And that's where these practices are starting to take off and why it makes sense for where they're getting put in place. And you mentioned that even comes with some cost savings sometimes where if you are essentially just dig a hole and have a storage pond, reduce some of the peak flow that goes downstream, you can get by with either, say, a smaller pipe since you need less flow, further downstream of that project, or, same thing with, say, ditch repairs or other infrastructure improvements from an open ditch standpoint too, is if we can take a look at where these practices make the most sense kind of further up in the landscape, then have that improvement for everything downstream, but then also, have the benefits that we need for some of that production, in the acres or in that watershed upstream as well. So is that essentially the gist of it, of what some of those conservation practices look like on some of those larger scales?
Yeah, definitely. And even in more so than an improvement, I'm hoping that we can look at a lot of these systems and say it doesn't even need an improvement. It can get by with a repair, which means less legal issues that the producers have to go through to try to make sure that their project can go through. And then again, we're getting that storage back on the landscape to help the whole system. So
Yeah, for sure. And so we mentioned some, I guess, some of the conservation drainage practice type things. So, I mean, are some of the main ones the storage ponds and wetlands, and where are you seeing most of those go as far as kind of within the state? Is mostly Minnesota River watershed? So where a lot of the work's going?
For the water quality and storage program, right in the appropriation that we got from the legislature, we need to prioritize the Minnesota River Basin and then the lower Mississippi River Basin in Minnesota. So that is where most of the projects are going. Applicants that are in those areas automatically get 10 more points. So they typically rise to the top for who's being funded. We have funded projects outside of that area, but of the last 2 rounds, we've had, I believe, all of the storage ponds, wetland restorations have been on a drainage system in the Minnesota River Basin. So it's been really successful in that area of the state, and we're really starting to move forward with it, which is exciting.
Sure. And I mean, there's an application process for all of this stuff too, and kind of getting those dollars out. What does that look like?
all of Bowser's grants that are competitive, we put out a request for proposal, and then folks can go online and see those. And our board conservationists are talking to most of our partners, so they're up to speed on the different grants that they can go for. And then there's just really an end application date. So the water quality and storage program actually just opened, or will be opening, excuse me, on October 30th, and will close December 23rd. So during that time period, folks just need to go in, answer a series of questions, talk about what their project is going to look like, and then upload that information onto our site. And then we have a scoring team that goes through, and then they score, and it's all open and honest. Everyone knows how many points are going to which question, and we go through and score the projects, and the higher scoring projects we fund. So
Cool. And what does kind of the say next step that I mean, I assume that there's some funding that was set aside for a lot of these projects here over the last handful of years, or how long is that kind of continuously funded for these programs, or some of the stuff, or what does that kind of look like here if we're looking future?
we have gotten $19 million from the legislature so far for that specific program. We have about $9 million left. This application period that's going to be opening up will be for $4.5 million. After that, we'll have one more that'll be the $4.5 million, and then we don't have future funding. So it's just the state of how things are with funds right now with the state. We're trying to find more funding. Once the federal government opens up their RCPP grant again, we'll apply and hopefully get some matching funds from them. I've looked to LCCMR for funds. So we're trying to get more funds to keep this program going, because I really see this as the solution to fixing our water quality issues, our flow issues, but still allowing our producers to have the drainage that they need. I mean, it's really this middle ground, and I think we can really get there, and storage is really the way to do that. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to keep this program going and successful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I was kind of get into as well, as what what some of these successes look like, and what is going to be that balance here moving forward. Just earlier today, for full disclosure to I guess the audience, we had recorded a couple of these here, these podcasts here in a day, and talking with some folks from AgriDrain and talking about water storage, within the soil profile as well. And that's something that's, I think, is underutilized or underappreciated, with being able to store more water. But the systems are essentially doing the same thing, which kind of the same theory, or I guess same outcomes for bigger public drainage systems, again, storing water, more surface water, versus in the ground. But having that balance of, hey, we can manage what we can do in the field, but then once it does get into our drainage systems, is, hey, then there's another step that we can, again, slow that down more, treat it, store that peak flow, have that have leach in, evaporate all the other stuff that's going on there with it too, before it goes down. Continue to go downstream, because we know we have some of those issues of water quality and quantity issues, of water moving downstream. And there's all these tools in the toolbox for what we can do further upstream, and it's kind of fun to talk about, again, what we can do, say it's on an individual farm level, but then also having some access to some of these programs at more larger scale, more watershed scale, for essentially tackling the same issue on different scales that also could be on the same landscape as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think the end goal and the final solution is going to be the soil health work that we can do on the farms, and also that drainage water management. The tough thing with that is we're very slowly increasing how much we're doing that in the state. And if I could snap my fingers and make it happen, that I think would be the final solution for what we really need. But in the interim, since we're not there yet, these storage practices are really gonna help. I don't want to say put a Band-Aid on it, because either way the storage is going to be a good thing. But yeah, I think that we really need to look at both types of practices, and as much as we can, keep pushing that soil health, keep pushing that drainage water management, because the more areas we can put that in the stage, is the better off we're going to be in the end. So
Yeah, and you mentioned it a couple times with kind of soil health and the relationship with water. And I guess, admittedly, I don't have, a ton of experience, and I think that's maybe something more in general within, say, agriculture, is soil health. Well, what is it? It's just, healthier soil. But, I guess maybe to you, what is that, soil health, when we talk about it in terms of water management and, sustainability on that side of things, what is that? what does that mean to you?
Well, anytime we can keep more water on the landscape. So when we have healthier soils and more organics in our soils, it's going to hold on to that water more. It's going to create an environment where we can keep that water on in the soil there. Um, and so when we're doing things like putting on cover crops or no-till, any of those practices are good soil health practices. And then you add that to the drainage water management, where we're essentially putting on a gate on the end and then holding water back in our tile and still allowing that soil to have access to that water throughout the year. I mean, all of that kind of works together to keeping that water in the soil. So that's, yeah, like I said, kind of the magic solution. So,
Yep. Being able to have some that likes to hang on to water, and then stopping the excess water that is going to be moving off as well. And so that's a shift in, maybe not a shift in approach, but different perspective on a lot of things. And we've seen a lot more maybe investments in, say, the cover crops and the no-till, and
yes.
One of the, I guess, easy things as well. It's easy to see. You can see things on the landscape that are doing it. We know it has those benefits for for soil health and for
Yep.
everything else that goes along with it. Where some of our projects and I guess essentially all of our pipe, from Briscoe's perspective, is, hey, it's buried in the ground and it's there and we forget about it. Whether it's doing cool things like drainage water management or saturated buffers or things like that, is it's kind of underappreciated because you don't see it.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is kind of cool to see those the wetlands and the storage ponds and things like that on these other infrastructure projects.
Yep.
That are, again, all kind of doing the same thing, but you get to be able to show them off a little bit more to see
True.
if they're working and how well they're working.
Yeah, that's true.
Question for you, for some of the issues that we continue to talk about here on the water table is water quality issues and water quantity issues. And we can, I guess, talk about that in terms of on the landscape of, hey, what happens in a drought when we don't have enough water and it's not enough for plant growth. But specifically when we're talking of it in excess, essentially too much water and too high of nutrients, what are some, or how do some of those issues manifest themselves in Minnesota, I guess, in any river or any watershed?
Well, I'll argue that there are people way smarter than me trying to figure out what the exact problem is. But we are experiencing more intense events. More intense events is going to really lead to folks wanting to put in more tile. More tile is going to mean more with water discharging downstream, and it's just a cycle. Again, there's research papers out there that argue that. I'm not going to say what's right or wrong, but it's a problem that we know a solution to, and we can, putting in storage, doing the soil health things, drainage water management, that's a solution to these excess volumes. And if you wanted me to talk a little bit about the issues that it causes, so
Yeah,
we
sure.
do have the excess volumes and peak flow rates that are coming through the systems, and our ditch systems aren't designed to handle what's coming through. It can result in erosion. And once you start losing the vegetation, once you start getting that erosion, you're taking a ton of sediment downstream with you. It's just going to continue to be an issue. So whether that's an issue of an under-designed system, it's an issue of just too large of a storm event that we're getting these more intense events now, it's just going to lead to water quality issues downstream and taking a lot of sediment downstream. And, and the Minnesota River Basin just has very erosive soils. So it's really prone to pulling all that sediment downstream. I'm going to talk about the sediment issues in Lake Pepin, and then the lower Minnesota River Watershed District has to continue to do dredging so that folks can get through the river at the outlet of their watershed. It just causes really big issues downstream with excess flows. So whatever the reason that they're there.
Yep. Yeah, and that was something interesting that I guess I learned in some research paper, I'm sure, and I don't know if I don't have the exact numbers with it. But when you're talking about some of the specifically the sediment issues that do come from higher flows, when we don't have the essentially proper ditch banks, is we have more water going through there again, whether it's from excess rain events or more intensity and all this other stuff, for all these other contributing factors that are out there. That's where essentially most of the sediment, and again, maybe you have the numbers for percent of sediment comes from, what we think of, hey, erosion in your crop field. And yeah, there is some, but I believe the majority, and it might be significant majority, is coming from those ditch banks.
There was a study done on the Le River, and it showed that it was near bank erosion, which is essentially on those ditch banks that are eroding. Beyond that, I can't really say, if it's mostly coming from the fields. Of course, you have open tile intakes, things like that. You're going to draw sediment down into them. But there have been studies that have shown it's that near bank erosion that's the issue in bringing the most sediment downstream.
Yep. And that's what I heard is it's something that's, yeah, it might be a little bit one year, might be a little bit one year, but then when you have these events, then,
Yep.
then things start sloughing off.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that in some of the drainage ditches that, around home and kind of where we farm and stuff like that
Yep.
is, yep, you can definitely tell when it's bad,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. And I'll add, I mean, that's for sure when you can tell it's bad after there's been a big storm event, you can see some of that. But creeks, if you're changing even the sustained flows in them, that can also be an issue. So, there are ways we can design to help them recover or be able to function better with the flows that they have. So that's just something else that we should be looking at that honestly Bowser's not taking on yet. So maybe the next step, but yeah, there, I don't know if you've heard the term two-stage ditches and
Yep.
things like that. So there are other things that we can do to work with the different flows we're getting. So, but it's not just the high flows. If we're changing kind of that bank full or even those base flows, it can also, bring sediment downstream and cause damage too. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's, again, the different tools in the toolbox for addressing
Yes.
a lot of this stuff, like I said, whether it's from everything that we mentioned so far. But yeah, even with open ditches, we can look at designing those things a little bit different too. And I know there's programs, and maybe not exactly through Bowser necessarily within Minnesota, but I know that there's been a lot of other projects implementing some of those ditch designs.
Yep.
And having a lot of success with that too. I mean, obviously, I think the best way that I had it explained to me is, yep, it's going to take a little bit wider floodplain, a little bit wider ditch. But some of the landowners are saying like, well, we're losing that much of the ditch anyway.
Yeah.
If it's not set up to be, structurally stable, essentially.
Exactly. Yep. 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 So, yeah. And I'll add on to that too. It's a good point. It makes me think about, the locations that we're looking for these storage areas too. A lot of times we'll be looking for these areas that aren't producing really well, that are right along, the ditch channels and possibly even areas where they're paying a lot because they're really high benefiting areas, yet they're still flooding a lot. So the farmers aren't able to make a lot of money on them, but they're paying really high assessments on them because they're drained so
Like
well.
valuable.
Yes. And that's one area I'm encouraging our partners, start here, talk to the farmers that have these really high benefiting areas, but they may not be producing that well. Maybe they'll be willing to put storage on these too. So I think that's really a key to finding good locations. So,
Yeah, and that's again where that balance is found a lot. And again, we can get into discussions and arguments, I'm sure, on preserving natural areas and having things where essentially nature is telling us where they want the wetlands or storage areas, things like that. Yep, definitely get it. There's also areas where we can have that balance of we can put in the storage on where it makes most sense from an operation standpoint, from a farming standpoint, from as well as from a water standpoint, and be able to engineer them to make them work the way that they're designed to as well. And that's gonna one of the good things about having this podcast and being able to be involved with this is being able to talk to people and have these discussions and have this dialogue on, hey, let's look at things a little bit differently. And that's something that I keep is continuously getting me motivated to be in this industry is, having those conversations and there is a lot of work ahead of us on a lot of management, on water storage, on sustainable impacts on a lot of this stuff. But there's a lot of opportunity out there for looking at things a little bit differently.
Yep.
And continuing to look at and tackle these problems in different ways, creative ways, or maybe the tried and true ways that sometimes too.
Yeah.
It's just hey, plug and play with what you got, and that might be the solution for that problem.
Sure.
So Rita, with chief engineer with Bowser, is that what you always wanted to do, or what you got into the industry for, or what? How did it all start for you?
No, I actually always wanted to be a pilot, and not just any pilot. I wanted to fly C-5s in the Air Force. That was every goal was towards, I'm going to fly C-5s in the Air Force.
Where did that
And
start?
I don't know. I wanted to be in the military, I knew, and I just thought being a pilot would be really cool, and I wanted to serve my country, and then I went to an air show, and I saw a C-5, and if you're not familiar with C-5s, C-5s are the planes that fly other planes around. I mean, these are
Was it
the massive planes that yeah. So, I was at ROTC my freshman year of college and went home over Christmas break and had an asthma attack, washing my dog. So I had a really severe allergic reaction, and that was it. I couldn't be a pilot anymore. So I kind of fumbled around for a while, wasn't really sure what I should major in. Because again, since I was probably in 6th or 7th grade, C-5s for the Air Force. So, I finally found out that if I got a degree in civil engineering, that would be the quickest way I could graduate. So, I said, "Okay, I'll just do this because I don't know what else to do." And, I have to say, fortunately, I really liked it. I really liked the classes, and I got hired by, a consulting firm. I worked for bar engineering for a number of years, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, I just started to love what I did. I always say water resources is as much of an art as it is a science. So I had, opportunities to do a lot of different types of work while in consulting, and then I felt the call to state service. So then I, worked for the DNR for a number of years, mostly on floodplain work, and then, when the job opened up at the Board of Water and Soil Resources, it really intrigued me because I knew they worked more with farmers and people around the state, and I grew up on a farm too. So I really, felt like I was kinda getting back to my roots, and it was really important to me, and that's one of the reasons I love the work I do so much now too, is because I really feel like we can help our producers find solutions to, be able to do better work and be more effective in what they do, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Well, that's
So
a hell of a pivot from a from a pilot, Air Force pilot into civil engineering. But no, I'm glad that you found a home with that, and
yeah.
yeah, definitely have that. That's a maybe unconventional path of
Yes.
going down that road, but seems to be working out for you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and that's why I tell my daughters, it doesn't really matter what you wanna do now, you never know, what direction you might head in, so and it could very well turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you, so.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming onto the water table today. This was really good, good overview on again some of the tools that are out there for producers, for landowners, and for designers that are out there looking at addressing some of these water issues, and taking that approach of adding in the practices where they make sense and where they're going to be the most impactful. So if anybody does have questions, they able to reach out to you, or how do they get in touch with some of the grants, some of the funding opportunities that you have with Bowser?
Absolutely, you can reach out to me, my information, all of Bowser staff are on our website, and, you could talk to your local SWCD. They're also gonna have great information about what grants are available, so.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much for coming on. It was
Yeah,
good conversation. Appreciate it.
yeah, happy